Here, I'm recording now just for all of posterity. Prescriptions and medication orders. We're going to have just a general review. We're going to talk about the elements of a prescription or a medication order. And actually, so you're going to hear those medication order. A medication order is mostly what we refer to in a hospital when a doctor's placing an order for any prescription for a patient that's not being issued to the patient, but it's about something that's going to be administered to a patient. Legal requirements for prescriptions and medication orders, labeling requirements, and then best practices. So the Durham-Humphrey Act, any of y'all that had law the last sequence, the Durham-Humphrey Act, they distinguished between legend and OTC drugs. So prior to 1951, you could literally go to the pharmacy, and if you knew what the drug was you wanted, you could ask for it and buy it. That's why until 1914, you could buy heroin and cocaine without a prescription. Just walk to the pharmacy. Till 1937, you could go buy cannabis. I have, where is it? I will show you guys. I have over 9,000 different mint condition. They came from a museum, cannabis products. They're over 100 years old. Anyhow, 1951, somebody says, "Hey, we've got to distinguish. We need to determine things that a patient can go buy on their own for their own relief, and then the things, and in part that had to do with television. It had, we already had radio, but television became more popular. Televisions were in homes, and so there was more direct to consumer advertising. People would hear about something, they'd want to go get it, and so that's kind of what pushed the need to create an OTC department. And Walgreens, they were the very first to create what they call the front end, or where they set the over-the-counter drugs. In the Durham-Humphrey Act, it required anything that was not OTC. On the label of the stock bottle, it had caution, federal law prohibits without prescription. So when you're in a pharmacy, any product that you ordered from your wholesaler, it would have that on there. If it had on there, then that product required a prescription from a doctor. So that had to appear on any legend drug label stock. And so again, the word legend, it's the same as prescription. If it's a prescription drug, it's a legend drug. And I had a student, Kelly, she told me she always remembered this act because of the legend of Humpty Dumpty. And I told her Humpty Dumpty wasn't even a legend, but if that helped her remember, then so maybe it'll help you remember. Then 2004, we had something called the FDA Modernization Act. And what that did was, if you'll notice right here, RX only. So instead of having to have that statement, this long statement, now on a bottle, it just has to have RX only or RX. So whenever we get back to the classroom, if you look at any of the bottles that are on our shelf, any of the stock bottles, if you look around, you're going to see on there somewhere it's going to have RX or RX only. Then we had the Drug Listing Act of 1972. What was special about that? That's when they came up with the NDC code. So every product, every medicine that's prescription and over the counter has a national drug code. And so the NDC code, how many digits is the NDC code? So we'll cover it. I'm not sure if I go into detail here, but excuse me, it's 11 digits. First 5 are the manufacturer, middle 4 are unique for the drug, the last 2 are the package size. Anytime there's a digit missing, so this is supposed to be 5, 4, 2. There's just 3 numbers here. You always just add a 0 to the front. So if this was just a -1, you'd put 01. If this was 8308, we'd put a 0 in front. So it's going to be 5 digits, 4 digits, and 2 digits. And the reason that you're going to see that discrepancy, it has to do with when they make the barcode scanning the lines for a barcode, it's binary code, so that has to have an even number of digits. So that's why you'll see as 10 digits. But as far as pharmacy practice, it's 11. It's 5, 4, and then 2 digits. Okay, here, now this is where you'll get to see if we can try this. Oh. So if you can, I don't know if y'all are able to do this while you're in the computer, but if you go to this POLLEV.com and type my name 142, you can join. Or if you've got your telephone, you can text, and then you just enter A, B, C, D, E, F, or G. So this is we're going to see if this works or not. The writing on here is tiny, so as y'all are seeing, if y'all can activate. So which statement is accurate? The Drug Listing Act of 1951 distinguished between prescription and OTC. Durham-Humphrey of 1972 required all drugs have NDC. How about this? I'm trying to see how I can see you guys. Are any of y'all able to access this? You can unmute and let me know.
I'm not able to.
It says you haven't activated a poll yet.
Okay. I was afraid of that. See, and then I even over here, like, see how it says activate? Let's see, oops. Oh, wait. Activate, making it able to, and let's see. Yes, so try it again. I've activated. So I don't want to waste too much time. So how about this? Is nobody's been able to, it's just shown it's not been activated.
It's still showing it's not activated.
Okay, well.
It was activated. You just kept clicking it active and inactive.
Okay.
It's active now.
So are you able to get into it now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So let's see if let's. So this right here, it was just kind of a quickie. I've made as we go on, you're gonna find I've made much shorter questions, but this was a trick because the Drug Listing Act, well, that's what made the NDC code. It was in 1972. Durham-Humphrey, that's 1951, and that's the one that made all drugs have to be either OTC or legend. Durham-Humphrey distinguished between prescription and OTC, so that's correct. The 2004 changed that caution to RX or RX only. And then 1972 mandated all drugs have an NDC. It's actually C, D, and E are correct. So, oh, but look, we got results. So sorry, guys, the answers are C, D. So C, D, and E are correct, and there's not even an option for that. So that should have been C, D, and E. Okay, well, I'm learning, and this is actually, if this works, there's going to be other times where we're able to use it, and it's going to be beneficial. Okay. So over the counter, what's over the counter mean? Products that can be purchased without a prescription. However, they have to be purchased. Oh, behind the counter. I skipped something. So we have over the counter. You guys know over the counter. Over the counter was distinguished as specifically products that a patient would be able to read the instructions on their own without a physician supervision. They'd be able to identify reasons that they should not use the medication. They'll read how long they should use the medicine before it's time to actually communicate with a doctor. So there were some very strict regulations on what was required on the label for a product to be considered and approved over the counter. Now, with over-the-counter products, over-the-counter so you can buy it without a prescription, we have a group of products called behind the counter. And these are products that can be purchased without a prescription. However, you can only purchase them at a pharmacy while a pharmacist is present. Meth check. Meth check is a federal law that was implemented when it started in the 80s, but we had an epidemic of crystal methamphetamine just destroying entire communities. And at the time, they realized just about anybody could make Sudafed into crystal meth. You just needed a few very, very simple equipment and a few chemicals, and it can be done. So MethCheck, what they did was they made it so that any purchase of Sudafed was regulated. So any product that contains Sudafed, and the generic name for Sudafed is pseudoephedrine. Mucinex D is a combination product. Mucinex contains an expectorant, which is guaifenesin. The decongestant, is Sudafed. So to purchase, you have to be over 18. You have to have a valid government ID. So that would be like a driver's license. And then there's a lot of people who don't have a driver's license, but they still have a government issued ID card. Something to keep in mind, this is trivial, and I've been a manager of a pharmacy several times where it was an unpleasant issue, just an ordeal. Just remember, whenever there's something that's a matter of law, it's outside of your control. No matter how angry a patient gets, no matter how compassionate you are and how much you understand, if somebody hands you an expired ID, what happens with the MethCheck system, there's a national database. And so you actually scan the back of somebody's ID card. It'll detect the last time that person purchased Sudafed, how much Sudafed has been purchased, have they reached their daily maximum, have they reached their monthly maximum. It also identifies if the ID is expired. If the ID is expired, there's nothing you can do to override it. So I've had it happen a lot where somebody will come in, especially sometimes elderly people, they don't want to renew their driver's license because they're afraid they might not pass or for whatever reason. But then when they go just try to buy Sudafed, they can't because their ID is showing that it's expired. So it has to be a valid in-date ID. There's this national database, and so there's a couple of states that have taken it a step further where they've made Sudafed actually require a prescription. But in every state and U.S. territory, any pharmacy that sells Sudafed has to have the technology to be linked up, and they have to follow this MethCheck program. Do you remember Ham? I thought that was a cool show. It really, I did but then when I came to realize how bad, I just had no idea how bad crystal meth had affected people, but it was a good show. Okay, so here we can try this again, but then if it ties up too much time, let's see, activate. So which of the following statements is untrue? Meth check is a federal program intended to minimize diversion. Sudafed can be converted to crystal meth relatively easy. Sudafed can only be purchased at a pharmacy register and a pharmacist or pharmacy technician must be present. And then if the government ID appears authentic but just happens to be expired, the patient is not eligible to make the purchase of Sudafed. So which statement was untrue? For y'all, let's see, show responses. Oh, well, I figure out the glitches, and I'm sorry, guys, this is me and technology, but the trick on here was where I put Sudafed can only be purchased at a pharmacy register. Well, that's all true, and a pharmacist or pharmacy technician must be present. Well, the fact of the matter is it's going to be a technician ringing them up, but the requirement, a pharmacist must be present. So that was just kind of a trick question. Plan B, one step, and now they have several of them. There's one called Whoops, one called In Control. There's multiple. Initially, there were very strict requirements. Initially, it had to be a female over 17 or a female accompanied by parents. And initially, you could only purchase it at the pharmacy register, and the pharmacist had to be on duty. And I worked nights for a while at CVS. You wouldn't believe, I mean, one night I sold something like 50. I went through 4 12-pack boxes, literally one night. But by 2019, there were changes, legislative changes. Plan B, it starts now on the shelves of retailers like CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, Target, Walmart, and more. And guess what? It's available at Valero gas stations and many smoke shops. And I had a student who told me that if you're at the company, you can even get a coupon. You can also buy it online, get it shipped to your door in 4 to 6 days. I'd be reluctant about that. It has to be taken within 5 days. The sooner it's taken, the more effective, but it's only 89% effective. So just keep that in mind as well. Another thing, if you ever have a patient, one role that a valuable role a technician plays, you're going to have a lot of patients that are going to come to the pharmacy and they're just totally caught off guard by how much something costs. You might have some young lady come up to the pharmacy and she says she wants to buy Plan B, and you'll say, okay, it's $54. She's shocked. Well, that's an opportunity, and it's ethical. It's your decision. You don't have to, but you can choose to. But at Planned Parenthood, it's available at no charge. Any Planned Parenthood. So here's just another one of those questions, and so I'm gonna create something so that we can all do it and practice it in a way. I don't want to waste time on it until we got this down pat. Behind the counter, so there are several CS, and CS stands for Controlled Substance. 5 medications federal law allows to be purchased without a prescription. So we're going to talk about it in a minute, but we have with our prescription drugs, we have controlled drugs. We have non-controlled, controlled drugs. So the controlled drugs, they're scheduled 1 through 5. Schedule 1 drugs, they have no approved FDA and medical indication. And that's heroin, LSD. Schedule 2 drugs, those are kind of hardcore. They're real powerful narcotics. And so, but the higher the number, the less addictive, the less abuse potential. So Schedule 5, that has the lowest abuse potential, the lowest potential for addiction. You're going to find Schedule 5, there's really 2 groups of drugs. There's antidiarrheals and cough medicines with codeine. So there's paregoric. Paregoric is elixir of opium, and it worked very well to treat diarrhea. Parapectilin was the product you could buy. It had paregoric And then it had pectin. Y'all might not remember kaopectate, but it's kind of a chalky-like paste. It's a clay. And what it does, it helps absorb excess water, and so that's how it helps to treat diarrhea. Well, parapectilin just combined elixir of opium and pectin, and you shake it up real well. It was excellent. It worked excellent for diarrhea. Problem was, people knew it was a suspension. If you left the suspension sitting for a couple of days, the opium elixir would rise to the top. And guess what? People get creative. People that want to abuse it, they would just siphon the elixir of opium off the top. Keep in mind, pharmacies, there was no internet. We weren't connected. You could go to 30 different pharmacies in one day and buy a bottle everywhere. So you could get this just elixir of opium, which is just a step from heroin whenever you got elixir of opium. Parents would even take advantage of, they would let it settle. They would use cotton balls and they would soak them with the opium elixir and then rub it on the gums of their babies who were teething. And it would, of course, it relieved pain and it would help the baby sleep. Then parents were using it for colic, and then parents were even using it to help children sleep when they weren't sleepy. So it was being used for some purposes that it was not intended to be used for. But it relieved discomfort, it relieved colic, or would knock the babies out. Keep in mind, this is all the way up until the 80s, there was nothing else available, not even prescription-wise, that relieved diarrhea. And so that's why the federal government said, you know, this product, this is going to be something somebody can buy without a prescription. So codeine's a powerful and effective cough suppressant. And guess what? All the way until the 1980s, we didn't have any medicine that was a very effective cough suppressant. Nothing. So we had one that's real common. Well, most of y'all have heard of promethazine with codeine, but one that was real popular because it tasted good. It was cherry flavored. I loved it. It tasted good. Cheracol. It was made by Upjohn. Cherry flavor. And pharmacies, all you have to do is you maintain a sales log. It's just like a composition book. Somebody would come in, you would write down, they would just tell you their name and address, they'd scribble a signature, and that was it. And the pharmacy would keep the logbook for 2 years and throw it away. We didn't send it into to the DEA, DPS. So that's one reason it just wasn't believed that people would be abusing the Schedule 5 drugs like this, so people could buy them without a prescription. The problem was, though, like even we have the promethazine with codeine. Well, guess what? They called it Cherry Call, and there was even a country western song that made it real popular. But they used Cheracol and made martinis or cherry rum and Coke, and it tasted good. However, these Schedule 5 federal law still allows them. They can be purchased without a prescription, but the states, all the states said at the state level, no, it's not going to be allowed to be sold over the counter. So these were effective. There were no alternatives to consider until 1980. In 1980, we had two different things that became available: dextromethorphan. Dextromethorphan, it's as strong, if not stronger. It's the best cough suppressant there is. One problem with it, young people found out if they take too much of it, it causes hallucinations. Otherwise, it's incredible. It's a very powerful cough suppressant. Imodium, when it first came out, it's actually an opium derivative, and so it was scheduled. When it first came out, it was a Schedule 3 prescription drug. Then they changed it to a 4, then a 5. Then they decided, no, it's not actually, shouldn't be controlled at all. So then it became non-controlled, and then it was put over the counter. And so as far as diarrheal medicines are concerned, unless it's caused by a microorganism, Imodium is the best thing that's available. And so both of these products, they're not controlled. They're as effective, if not more. And so then there's no longer any need for those earlier products. What happened, the federal laws never changed, but most state laws, there's still two, and I'm not going to tell you which two. But the state laws introduced laws that treat all Schedule 5 medications as prescription drugs. So once they did that, you can no longer purchase without a prescription. See, no, I'm not telling you. So in Texas in 1992, and then cough syrups with codeine in 1994. No more. Now, when there's a difference between state and federal law, what do? You'd think federal law is bigger, more important. You'd think it would be the law you follow. You always follow the strictest law. So this is an example where federal law allows something, these Schedule 5 drugs, to be purchased without a prescription. State law doesn't. We have to abide by state law. Types of prescriptions. So we have the two things that we're talking about, medication order and prescription. And most of the time, whenever you hear the word medication order, that's a prescription order in a hospital or institution. When we talk about a prescription, we're talking about something that's issued to a person to be filled, like at a community pharmacy or an outpatient pharmacy. Legend drugs, well, we just talked about these. The Durham-Humphrey Amendment, they distinguish between OTC and legend, with legend drugs or prescription drugs. Then we had in 1970, the Controlled Substances Act. In 1970, what happened, we already had a bureau, a division of narcotics investigations. The problem was they didn't distinguish the penalties. Like, is it if somebody happens to have a bottle of Tylenol with codeine, or if they happen to have 10 pounds of cocaine, what's the criminal punishment? And so they had to be broken down and defined. And in part, they had to identify levels of the controlled drug levels to create the different criminal implications. It's something I've been shocked by, but you know, I like watching the show Cops, but when somebody will have one pill on them and then they act like it's a federal offense, it's like, holy cow. Yeah, but it identified drugs based on their potential. So it's based on the potential for addiction and potential for abuse. Non-controlled substances and controlled. So before 1970, we already had it in existence. It was called the Federal Bureau of Narcotic Investigations, but the name was changed to the DEA, and the DEA was given both the regulatory and enforcement authority over controlled substances. Of the controlled substances, we have CS1, 2, and then 3 through 5. And the reason they're grouped this way for a reason. So CS1, these drugs, they have no FDA-approved medical indication, and so they're completely illegal, no prescription for them. CS2, these are prescription drugs, but the potential for addiction or abuse is so high that there's very strict regulations regarding the prescriptions, how many a patient can receive at one time, all the rules about the prescriptions for these Schedule 2 drugs. Then we have Schedule 3 through 5. They also have their own rules. They're not nearly as strict as the C2, but they're strict, and they're stricter than drugs that aren't controlled. So in pharmacy, you're going to be dealing with three groups of pharmacy drugs: non-controlled, control C through 5, and then C2. So again, they're identified based on potential for addiction and abuse. Schedule 1, there's no approved medical indication. And the thing that confuses a lot of people is cannabis. Everybody's heard of medical marijuana. Technically, there's no approved FDA medical indication for cannabis. And it's all just a matter of semantics and politics, but that's the whole reason it's still classified as a Schedule 1. Technically, federally, it's a Schedule 1. This is an example where the states cannot change. They can't make a Schedule 1 product. They can't legalize a Schedule 1 product. So it's different. When you think about it, how was it the government legalized Schedule 5s for OTC purchases? The states could say no, but it's not the other way around. Now, if the government says no, cannabis is a Schedule 1, even though states have done it, technically they don't have that right. So if a person happened to just step on the wrong toe, offend the wrong person, you can get in trouble. If you're a technician, a pharmacy technician in Colorado, and you happen to get arrested for driving under the influence and they claimed it was cannabis, you could actually lose your registration because you violated federal law. C2 is the strongest narcotic pain medicines and ADHD. ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. C3, the C3, so you're going to find there's a couple of generic rule of thumbs that'll help you remember things, but the Schedule 3, it's codeine tablets, combination codeine with Tylenol or codeine with aspirin. And the perfect example, the most common, is Tylenol number 3. Then there's 2 other drugs, and once you've memorized these, learned these, then you're going to know your Schedule 3 drugs. Testosterone, and then Suboxone. Suboxone's used, it originally was approved for maintenance therapy to help people who were addicted to crack. Now it's used for addiction to crystal meth, for addiction to opiates, and even alcohol. The Schedule 4, the most common are the benzodiazepines. They end in LAM or PAM. The medications people take to help them sleep. And then we have 2 more. Both carisoprodol is a muscle relaxer, tramadol's for pain. They were on the market for decades. They weren't controlled. And then out of the blue, it was our mid-1990s, both of them became scheduled, and they're Schedule 4. And in Schedule 5, guess what? It's cough syrups with codeine and antidiarrheal. So what must appear on the label? So if you have a prescription for anything that happens to be a controlled drug on the prescription label, it's going to have caution. Federal law prohibits the transfer of this drug to any person other than the patient for whom it was prescribed. So let's say that you went to the dentist, you had severe pain, he gave you a bottle of 12 Norco 10 milligram. You took 2 of them. You have a bottle of 10 that are just sitting in your cabinet, expiring. You don't plan on using them. A friend comes over and is having a massive headache or happens to have some kind of injury and is in severe pain and asks if you have anything to get for pain relief. You say, oh yeah, I do. And you let them have a tablet. You have both broken the federal law. You by providing it, them by accepting it. So that's this federal law prohibits. Another reason this is important to understand, if you have a prescription for any controlled drug, you have to keep the pills in the original container. This is a real problem. Like, what if you're just going to go someplace for the weekend and you don't want to carry a big bottle of something? You just want to put a few tablets in a small bottle and just put them all together. That's breaking the law. So just technically, if you were pulled over and a police officer opened the bottle, if you have a controlled drug and it is not in its original bottle with that label, it's breaking the law. Now the reality is, if you ever did run into a problem, it would be dismissed. By the time you had to defend yourself, as long as you're able to justify and prove you had a prescription for the medicine, you're not going to have a problem. So this just asks which ones, which schedule 1, heroin, 2, fentanyl. So we'll have fun with this one other day. There's another program to try, but was just trying to spice things up. Okay, prescriptions. A prescription is defined as an order of a medication for a patient that's issued by a physician or another licensed healthcare prescriber for a valid medical condition. You know what we're going to do, guys? Why don't we do this? Because y'all get your break. Why don't we take a break until 10:20? So about 10:15-ish, I'll send out the Zoom invitation. We're just going to pick up here, and we'll finish this out today, and we'll see how far we get. As and then just depending on how far we get, we might just end up starting on writing prescriptions tomorrow. So is everybody? Hold on, let me see everybody. So is everybody good with that? If you're good with that, I'm going to end this here, and then we're just going to pick up here when we come back.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So about 10:15, you'll get an announcement, but 10:20 we'll resume. Perfect. I'll. Okay.